Matthew Ricciardella joins me here today. You could learn what his team is up to by heading over to crystalviewcapital.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. But we're going to be talking about the level of acquisitions that they've been going through over 2024 and what they're seeing as a trend in the marketplace, especially regarding that low income housing and the need there. So, really appreciate your time here today, Matthew.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I warned you, we're going to probably start things off by talking a little bit about your background and how you found your way into real estate investing. But we'll kind of keep that as a truncated version here today. But would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, be happy to, Jack. So, I started my career in real estate as an investor back in 2024. So it's been 20 years since I bought my first duplex in Long Beach, California, and it's been one hell of a ride ever since. I started as a residential home flipper in Southern California. That's how I got my start, and kind of an interesting start. The way we found our deals at that time was we picked up the phone and we contacted sellers directly and we bought deals off market. And that's very similar to the way we do it today. We just kind of scaled that process. But to make a long story short, did well with the flipping business. But at that time, I said to myself, I really want to create a business that got predictable, ongoing cash flow. When you're flipping homes, you're kind of only as good as your last flip. And if you don't flip another one, you really have no more income coming in. So I wanted in mailbox money, as they call it, income that came in, rain or shine. And that's why I got involved in commercial real estate that was income producing. And at that time, this is back in '07, '08. Actually, I got involved in income producing commercial real estate. And I owned office, retail, multifamily, industrial. But I found time and time again, there were certain characteristics about manufactured housing communities and self storage facilities that I was very attracted to. You had a very inefficient market. Most of these are mom and pop owned and operated, so very fragmented with operational inefficiencies that I could solve. And an inefficient market in the sense that there wasn't a lot of institutional capital at that time chasing those type of deals. And because of those two things, I really found an opportunity to buy properties at a very attractive basis and then to turn them around very quickly and create value and a lot of cash flow. And I did very, very well for my own account owning those two property types. I was an owner operator from '07 till 2014. And then I decided to scale my business up at that time. I really felt like I was on to something. It was just I was lacking the capital to really scale effectively. So I launched Crystal View Capital Fund One back in 2014.
So, that's one of those things that is such a mindset shift. I mean, you went from the house flipping to what you're doing today. Did you ever find during that process there was like a light bulb moment that you decided you needed to make a change long term, or was that just kind of a gradual progression?
I would say it was more of a gradual progression. At that time, I attended a lot of conferences and, I'd like to think of myself as a learning machine. I'm very interested in learning my industry and also what's going on in the world. And, I did a lot of research around income producing commercial real estate. Maybe it was partially luck, partially my research, but these asset classes kind of fell into my lap. And you ever do something and deep down in your gut, it just feels right. It makes sense. Feels like this is an area for me. That's how I felt, back in 2007 when I first uncovered the asset class. It was that gut instinct that just told me this is the right place to be. I guess I was right. I'm still here.
Well, you mentioned that the low income housing is really underserved and you're trying to provide a solution there. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you're doing and what your fund is acquiring over the past year?
Yeah, happy to, Jack. So right now we're acquiring assets mostly in our Crystal View Capital Fund 4, which is a $200 million equity offering. And to your point, we've identified that the US is in a low income housing crisis position right now, which to us, what that means is there is a lack of supply of affordable housing. for working class folks in this country. And we feel like we're honored to fill that void. And the way we fill that void is we're going out there, we're buying manufactured housing communities across the US. And what our team is doing is we have a team that's entirely dedicated to finding homes, transporting them, and setting them up on vacant sites within our communities. We call it the Home Sales Coordination Team here at Crystal View. The name of our management company is Osprey Management. So what that team is doing once we own the parks we own, they're identifying, okay, here's the lots we want to place homes on. They're transporting them to the site. They're setting up the utilities. And then we're going out to the marketplace and effectively putting a campaign in place to find these folks that are looking for affordable housing. And frankly, Jack, they're finding us because there is a very limited supply of these affordable housing communities across the U.S. And that's the interesting thing about mobile home communities, I'll add. Municipalities in the U.S. don't want to see any new development of mobile home communities. But the municipalities across the U.S. need supply of affordable housing. That's the great irony as we see it. We call it NIMBY, not my backyard. They view these as, hey, that old stigma of trailer trash and, you're going to attract the wrong clientele. We don't look at it this way. A lot of these folks are hardworking Americans and they want pride of ownership. They want a home that they could be proud of, that they build equity in, just like you and I and anyone else for that matter. They may not be able to afford a built home, but their dreams are the same as most Americans. And again, we're just honored that we could provide that void, fill that void for these folks. And it's tremendously rewarding for myself, my team, the on-site managers, and it pays well too. Our investors are very happy in what we're doing. We're creating tremendous value across our manufactured housing portfolio, and it's delivering some really nice cash on cash return.
This is kind of interesting. You have a whole arm of individuals that are finding homes and moving them into the vacant spots. That is typically one of the harder things to do. Like, you said you primarily purchasing new?
Primarily new, some pre-owned, but the overwhelming majority is new homes. We'll buy them from various manufacturers. It could be Clayton, it could be Skyline. It depends on that particular region champion we have relationships with, and we're dealers in most communities that we own. So we're buying these homes at wholesale. Again, we're bringing them to the sites. And then we have a great marketing team who's going out there and they're using social media, they're using some print ads and getting in front of potential buyers. We're bringing those buyers in. And then we have financing programs for them, Jack. So we have some in-house financing that's available to our tenants. And also we have relationships with some third parties that are providing financing for these folks. Because that was the big issue for years and years and years is, these people could not afford homes because they didn't have an ample credit score. Banks didn't want to finance them. So once again, there's this huge void there for financing, and we're trying to fill that void. And it's been working out really, really well for both ourselves, our residents, and of course, our investors.
So, yeah, I was going to ask you about the financing piece of it. Are you doing kind of a rent to own situation, or is it just full financing where they're actually paying? I wouldn't call it a mortgage. They're titled like a car, right?
That's right. They're personal property. They're titled like a vehicle through the DMV, but you could take a security interest on title. Like, if you owned a vehicle, the bank that's financing that vehicle for you, they're going to take a priority lien position on title. And that's what we're doing. And we have a third party that's actually a mortgage loan originator. They're servicing these loans. They're licensed to do so. And we're just putting our capital out there. We have an affiliate entity of ours that's putting our capital out there. And then occasionally, this third party finance company, they're called Dippy, they are financing the homes off of their balance sheet. So most of these, to answer your question, Jack, they're finance deals. We do some rent to owns in states that we're permitted to do them in, but there's certain laws within certain states that you have to be aware of. So most of our deals are financed.
Okay. That's interesting. So, you know, one of you had mentioned that a lot of cities aren't going to like there's just no building new mobile home parks anymore. I mean, that's the situation. And like you said, it's kind of a double-edged sword because they do need this type of product.
Yep.
I would imagine somebody coming in like you though, and you're bringing in brand new trailer houses. It's almost a instant value add, not only for your park and for your residents, but for the city because you're showing the level of commitment.
That's right. I think it's a win-win-win across the board. There's really no losers in this scenario. We buy communities where there's typically vacancy and we're filling that vacancy. Sometimes we're buying parks that are half full, sometimes they're 75% occupied. But we've got hundreds of sites across our portfolio that we're keenly focused on filling. What I'm referring to when I say NIMBY, they can't stop you from filling sites that are already
Right.
permitted. What I'm talking about is if you want to do a ground up play on a new development of a mobile home community, that's where you run into obstacles. That's very challenging. And again, that's where I find the irony but again, there's this negative stigma that's attached. And what we're doing within our communities, typically there's excess land that's available. So once we get to 100% occupancy, we're actually taking excess land and we're hiring an engineer and we're putting plans and permits in place to build even more sites in those communities because it just makes that much sense. Rents continue to grow at an unprecedented pace. That's the other thing here. Think about what it costs to buy a new home. Think about what it costs to rent an apartment. Over the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to see extraordinary rental growth and occupancy growth across our communities.
I think that's one of those things too that, before people get into buying trailer houses or trailer parks is the fact that it, yeah, at least in my part of the world, it's extremely rare for somebody to actually move a house themselves. So
That's
if the
right.
house isn't there occupying a vacant spot, it's almost impossible to get it filled.
So we're in the storage business. I've been in the multifamily business in the past. And I think one of the nuances that's very attractive to us about manufactured housing communities is that cost to relocate. So as you go up each year on your rents, within reason, of course, and you have to be a good landlord, and you have to invest back in the community. But a lot of people come to us and say, "Hey, aren't you worried that tenants are going to move out?" And the thing about this is it's very costly to move a home. We're talking five to $10,000. So for that reason, tenants rarely, I mean, if ever, move out of our communities. We're a great landlord. We're continually investing back in the communities, new roads, updating clubhouses, enhancing pride of ownership across these communities. And our rents, frankly, are at or below market in most of our communities. There are some landlords out there that are quite egregious, that push rents way above market, and they're not investing back in the community, and they have created kind of a bad name for some of us good operators that are out there. But to answer your question, the cost to move these homes can be quite high. And for that reason, also, I'll tell you this, Jack, in some of the regions we operate in, we actually own the toter trucks, and our managers have CDL licenses and they could operate this equipment. And what we here at Hersavu, we call that controlling our own destiny. So we're not relying on third parties that could gouge us for prices, and we have to work at their schedule and their pace. We are vertically integrated and we do things at the lowest cost on the time frame that we want to best serve our customers and our investors.
So just to remind everybody, we're talking to Matthew Ricciardella. You can learn more what his team is up to by heading over to crystalviewcapital.com. That's crystalviewcapital.com. Found some value in what we're talking about so far? Do us a quick favor, share this with one of your investor friends. So you mentioned that you're still finding some of these properties off market. How are you locating these, or what's that process like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, back to when I started, I mentioned that I picked up the phone when I had my residential home flipping business and I was reaching out directly to these owners, building relationship. Same concept. And we're vertically integrated. And I think that's really important to note, Jack. Our third party property management is all in house. Our acquisitions is in house. Our marketing is in-house. Our finance and accounting team, all in-house. So we control our own destiny. And acquisitions is no different. We have 7 to 8 full-time professionals. They're on the phone, they're up in the air, going out, visiting with these owner operators, listening to their story, sharing the asset that we own in those marketplaces. We own in 28 different states, so we have a presence pretty much across the entire US. And what we're doing is we're positioning ourselves as the best steward for their asset. And sometimes for these folks, it could be their grandfather, kind of spilled their blood, sweat, tears to build this community. And some of these owners worked in these parks or these storage facilities since they were children, and they want to see it go to good hands. Somebody who's going to take great pride in this ownership and make it better, not worse. And we do that. And we've done it time and time again. So we spend a lot of time educating these folks of why we'll be a good steward, and we have liquidity within our farm. We've got over $100 million of dry powder right now that we could put to work. So for those reasons and many more, we feel like we are the best buyer possible for these owner operators. So that's what our team is doing. They're basically spreading that word and getting in front of these folks and educating them. We're getting a lot of offers out there on a weekly basis. And we're doing deals when a lot of others are kind of sitting on the sidelines because interest rates are elevated and they want to wait for the perfect time to get in. But when you could control your own destiny and create value quickly and deliver for your investors, we think there's no better time than today.
So now that when you acquire these properties, they're typically probably mom and pop groups or smaller
Yeah.
investment companies that are holding on to this. Have you found, since you're operating now across 28 states, that's probably quite a few parks at at this point. Are you finding like low-hanging fruit, or is there something that is pretty consistent amongst them where you can add almost immediate value?
Well, again, we're out there, we're acquiring parks and storage, but the overwhelming majority of the Fund 4 portfolio is parks at this point, and our acquisition pipeline is entirely parks. To answer your question, we call them levers. There's several levers that we could pull to create value. And the first one is a lot of these owner operators that we buy from, they're not at market rent. So you've got the immediate lever that you could pull to bring them just below or at market. And you're going to have to invest some capital back into the community to justify that. So again, the road, the updated clubhouses, enhancing pride of ownership and curb appeal for these residents. So we pulled typically that lever first. Then you've got scenarios where utilities are master metered and they're included in the rent. So to conserve water and conserve utilities, what we'll do is we'll actually go out to each individual home. We'll install sub meters. We'll read that usage on a monthly basis and we'll bill accordingly. So that does two things. One, it conserves water, which municipalities love. And number two, that activity is actually going to fall all to the bottom line. So basically, what you're doing by doing that pass through, you could take $100,000 water bill and pass it through to your resident. And that's going to fall to the bottom line, which obviously is going to juice cash flow. It's going to juice returns to our investors. The next lever we could pull is taking a look at those vacant sites across the community, and we'll bring either pre-owned or new homes to fill those vacant sites. And over time, as we continually fill occupancy, as we continually increase revenue and pass those costs through, you could take a park that you acquired at a 4 or 5 cap, which I don't know, let's call it maybe a $200,000-300,000 NOI. You could turn it into something that's got a 4, 5, 600,000 dollar NOI if you know what you're doing within a relatively short holding period. Let's call that period 1 to 5 years. And that's what we've been known for at Crystal View. And that's what we've executed upon time and time again.
So, can you talk a little bit about how you've been able to scale? With everything that you've been talking about here, although you have a long journey to get to this point.
Yeah, we've had our bumps and bruises. I'm not going to lie. You've got to learn from your mistakes, and we've done that. And I think it comes back to the culture and the team, really, to be honest with you. you've got a great culture, which I believe we do, where we're a meritocracy and people within the management company, they're getting paid based upon the performance they deliver. And I think there's a great alignment there because investors love seeing that as well when you have that type of culture. And it's an idea meritocracy in the sense that we encourage everybody in this organization. It's a really flat hierarchy and it's free flowing ideas. So I want to hear what a maintenance guy has to think out in Indiana. He may know of something or some way to do something better at his site that translates across the whole portfolio. That's an absolute game changer. So we're not looking at it like this person's above that one and that one's below this one. We're looking at it like, hey, we each have our own job function and tasks and abilities and talents, but we have a common goal and vision. Let's all work towards that as a team. So I think to answer your question, how did we scale? It's really assembling the right team, having the right culture, putting the right systems in place. That's really what's allowed us to do that up to this point. I think that's what's going to allow us to go to the next level where we've got today, we're close to $600 million of assets under management. I would anticipate in the next year, 18 months, 2 years, we're probably going to be $1 billion firm.
Was your
Amen to
biggest
that.
What's your biggest expensive lesson, and what did you learn from it?
Well, how much time do you have?
As much as
Um,
you're willing to give, actually.
well, if I had to distill it down, there's been many of them, but I think some of the worst mistakes I've made is putting the wrong people in positions and then not cutting the cord quickly enough when we knew that wasn't working out. Maybe I felt like, oh, I don't want to offend this person. But what I could tell anybody who's in business or thinking of going into business, people understand. And it's not fair for them to keep them in a role. It's not working for you and it's not working for them because it's toxic to the organization. It's toxic to the rest of the team. I think at this point, you develop pattern recognition and you could identify certain traits and talents and abilities in people, and you know what role is going to kind of work best for them. And we try to plug them into those roles. So for us, like when we're bringing on new talent into the organization, Jack, we're not saying like, oh, it's time to bring on an investor relations person or an accounting person. Yes, they have to have that skill set, but what we're doing first and foremost is who's going to be a team player, trying to find people that are going to fit within this culture, that are inspired by the things that we're doing. And if they have those characteristics, we'll find a home for them within the organization. And people have moved laterally across the company from one department to the next because they have the right culture. They have the right mindset. And that's what's key for us in building out this team. So the mistake I've made is taking people that weren't a cultural fit and plugging them into roles and leaving them there longer than they should be there.
Could you talk a little bit about some of these communities that you're in? You're inheriting some of these tenants who may have lived there for a number of years, and now they have a new owner. There's a lot of uncertainty, but what has been their experience? Do you have any story in particular you could share?
Well, I guess the first thing is you buy a community, and a lot of these residents, they immediately think of the worst. They think, oh, here comes the big bad landlord. They're just going to raise our rent and they're not going to invest back in the community. And I can tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. So, our on site manager, they're our eyes and ears to the residents within the communities that we own. So, the first thing we need to do is educate that on site manager of what is our vision for this community. Yes, we need to bring the rents to a market level to be competitive and to deliver returns for our investors. But also, look at what we're going to do here. We have a plan to improve roads. We have a plan to cut trees back. We have a plan to install a new playground. We have plans to buy 10 new homes and bring them into sites or eliminate old homes that are abandoned within some of these communities that are eyesores. And we're going to really enhance the curb appeal and make this a place where residents are proud to live in. And once residents can see that vision from the manager, the on-site manager, Then all of the sudden, we've had wonderful letters from residents saying, thank you for what you've done here. This has been known for the last 25 years and nobody's invested money like you guys have. So it's all about having this open line of communication and really conveying what our plans and what our vision are for the communities that we own and operate in.
Well, one last question then is regarding your fund number 4. You're on track right now. I think you mentioned a cash on cash return of close to 7.5%, which is fairly high. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that? Is it going as planned, or is that something that came as a surprise?
Well, I would say that it's actually going ahead of projection, Jack. This is a 2023 vintage fund. So our ramp up was very, very quick. And I think it speaks to the management team. I think it speaks to the vertical integration. Again, if we were to hand off the third party property management to some disinterested third party that's just kind of clipping a fee each month, they're not going to think about the vision the same way the owner is. And I put a lot of my own money into the funds that I sponsor. So believe me when I tell you that I care about these returns and there's an alignment of interest to drive value across the portfolio. And I want to do that as quickly as possible for my investors and for myself. So I think to answer your question, it's ahead of projection. And the way we've been able to achieve that is really rallying together as a team and going out there and making these improvements within these communities and these self storages that we've purchased. And I think that 7.5% is going to be pretty conservatively 8.5% in the next 12 months as we continue to bring on new opportunities, new assets, and we add value to those new properties.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Matthew. Just one more time to remind everybody, head over to crystalviewcapital.com, Crystal View Cap. And Matthew, I actually neglected to tell you or remind you that we're going to jump into rapid fire questions here in a moment.
I thought you did a great job. It was a very short period. We packed a lot into it. A lot of it was hopefully valuable to your listeners. I thought you had some good questions there.
So, and with the raise of your eyebrow, I'm guessing that the rapid fire questions comes as a surprise.
It does, but I love that type of stuff. So fire away.
The first one is, what lie do real estate investors sometimes tell themselves?
I can make it work at any price. So I think the moral there is, look, this is a business of buying properties and underwriting conservatively to deliver either for yourself or your investors. And if once you have success and you get complacent, be careful. Don't think that it's you. Yes, part of it is you, but don't think it's only you. And you could go and buy anything at any price and make it work because you can't. You're going to fail if you think that way. So you got to maintain that modesty and you got to maintain that conservatism no matter how much success you achieve.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't sell. I could tell you that's one of the largest regrets I've had. The irony here is I have to sell, Jack, because we're set up in vehicles with limited lifespan and our investors expect to exit. I kick myself thinking about and some of our exits have been extraordinary. We've averaged across all of the exits that we've had in our fund about a 68% internal rate of return. Those are fantastic returns, but I could assure you if we held on to some of those assets and we continued to create value, that number would be a hell of a lot higher.
Do you have a book recommendation?
There's a book behind me called Poor Charlie's Almanac. It's written by Charlie Munger. I've read the book many, many times, but it just brings you back to rational thinking and not making huge mistakes in business and life. So that's a book I would highly recommend. And you could see a picture of the cover right behind me.
And lastly, what single strategy, process, or tool have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact to you or your business?
It's a great question. I know this may not be the answer that you're expecting, but me assembling the team that I've assembled has been by far the biggest time saver. Yes, there's some fantastic technology that's available to all of us today that wasn't available 10 years ago, both CRMs, operating software. across our properties. But having people that adopt that vision, embrace the same vision that I have, and rolling that out across the organization where they can make informed decisions using data and not just relying on me to make decisions based off gut instinct has been the single largest time saver. Not only that, it's made us very, very much more profitable than we've been in the past and operate way more efficient.
One of the aspects that we didn't cover here today regarding scaling that I kind of mentioned earlier around the mindset. Was there a period of time where you started seeing adding people on as an asset, an investment versus an expense?
I've always been very frugal and I've always been very cost conscious. And I was always trying to hold back on my payroll. And that was a huge mistake. I think really when we started to grow and grow more effortlessly was when I brought on top grade talent. And it's going to cost you more, but it's going to make your life so much better and it's going to make you so much more successful in the long run that it doesn't even make any sense. So that would be my advice, whether you're starting out or whether you really have more of a mature organization like we have today. Don't hold back on great talent. It can become your largest asset.
Well, Matthew, this has been a fantastic conversation. One last time, crystalviewcapital.com. I hope you come back again sometime. This was great.
I really enjoyed it, Jack, and I'd love to come back.